Just wondering, how does the state feel about the possibility of using bioremediation for the chromium plume?
Well, the bioremediation, the molasses idea is one of two techniques. The other one is sodium dithionite. So they're right now they're got some in situ studies going, tests using molasses at R28 and sodium dithionite at R42. The R42 sodium dithionite is a push-pull type technique. The molasses is more of a push it in, let it drift, with some pullback, but very minimal. So we look at it as it's going to, given the depth of the regional aquifer and the plume and the complexities, the heterogeneities of the strata, is that in situ it's probably going to have to be an option, remediation, along with polys and pump and treat. The key is access to the plume in terms of surface area, and so we've been working with the laboratory on looking at maybe some horizontal completion. These are gravels, sediments. They're loose. So the drilling technologies right now are maybe there for horizontal completion along that upper 50 feet of plume. So we'll see. But we'll support it. But we got to have good data sets. We got to have reasonable uncertainties, and that's. Does that answer your question?
Thank you. Haruko.
I guess I might have missed in your talk, but have you done risk assessment, and what is the major risk pathways in this site?
We did preliminary risk analysis, and again, I will say that again, we need for all these risk assessments to have decision criteria to be evaluated, and that we have done some communication in the past with regulators, and this is again above my pay grade, because whatever they decide to be these decision targets and decision goals, we can evaluate those. But we haven't had this kind of clear goals to be applied to evaluate what the risk or what is the cost, or to do any kind of detailed risk and cost analysis, you need very well-defined criteria, and we haven't had those available to us on a technical level.
Would those criteria be part of the decision that you and NMED and in collaboration with DOE use in making that decision? Getting back to Haruko's question, I think what she's really asking is, if you don't know whether there is a risk imposed by the current contamination or not, there may not be a need for active remediation. Is that what you're trying to say, really? Yeah.
Well, it's from the state's viewpoint, a damage to the resource is a damage, and off-site migration across the facility boundary is obviously an issue for us to Pueblo lands. We want to make sure that.
So, Michael, to follow on that, are you using MCL as the yardstick? Or are
for cleanup?
Yeah, or for any action, yeah.
Well, we're not going to have LANL cleanup to background. Background hexavalent chromium at the lab is around 5 or 6 ppb. That would take literally more money than what we have and lots of time. We're going to just try to apply common sense to the cleanup. And in terms of actions, there's going to be a remedy selection down the road. Right now they're still in the process of gathering enough data to at least submit a corrective measures evaluation. And then after that, then the implementation. And then after that, some kind of a remedial selection, or remedy selection. So, we're going to be there. I mean, we're going to work with LANL to make sure that it gets done right, but not excessive in terms of blowing budgets. So that's all I can say.
So to follow on that thought, so I take it the use of Crotran and the big DT or any other high performance computing tool sets that your team developed, Monty, are supportive of those characterization or data analysis. But are they in a going back to what we discussed on day one, are they in a category that you would consider them, fully QA to support, remedial alternative selections down the road? Or are you working toward that goal?
I mean, all
when
our
you develop
code,
your tools?
our codes, Crotran and all the codes that we currently use, dominant portion of them are open source. They are fully documented, subject of full version control and unit testing. Actually, everybody on the web can see the testing of every single of our codes and can see that which test they were passed or failed. So we have full QA of our codes.
You have already done
Yes,
that?
yes.
Okay. And with concurrence from the state, I assume? Or what's the state take on that?
Well, in terms
process?
of modeling, we're behind the modeling. We know modeling's got to play a role in the end game, and we're going to be watching it. We have been watching it. We're going to check them. When they predict something, we're going to compare it to the observed values or measurements. I mean, we realize it's got to be a tool in the toolbox, but we want to make sure that the uncertainties are reasonable and that the public will be confident, in the outputs. So we're behind it, but we want to make sure there's guidelines and it's being tracked well, and so.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I don't think we have DOE folks from the site in the room, right? Do we? I don't think so. Okay. But let me ask you, maybe Monty can speak to it. So it sounded like there is some plan that is being developed to go through additional data characterization, then remedial investigation and remedial alternative selection, and then record decision, all that process. Is that process planned out in 5 years, 10 years? What kind of schedule are you working to complete that process?
The corrective measures evaluation, which is a big deal. It's basically all the data, looking at all the data, and coming up with the best path forward in terms of some kind of the different alternatives for remediation, for cleanup. That's a big deal. And I think right now it's scheduled for 2019. So I believe it's fall of 2019. That document is due. So hopefully we can get things moving. And
Hi, Bruce Robinson, Los Alamos. Just to amplify on that, while we are collecting the data that would be required to write the CME, we're also intending to do the interim measure, which is the plume control interim measure, which keeps the plume as compact as we can, keep it on LANL property and not off-site. At the same time, there was description about the in situ pilot studies for the remediation. We're conducting those now, doing the sampling. We've already applied the amendments. Once we have data from those, we'll design a cross-hole amendments test and then operate it. And we think that that gives us time to control the plume through these hydraulic measures, plus collect the data we need to evaluate the in situ remediations. Of course, with more data, we'll also be able to evaluate other alternatives, such as pump and treat, or maybe some combination. So that's kind of the general plan.
Thank you for providing that context. It's very helpful.
You're welcome.
Yeah. So along that line, since I'm in this group that also emphasizes a lot on stakeholder engagement, I know part of plume that is subject to some uncertainty, is right in the southern boundary of the site. That's touching the, Pueblo, which, belongs to the tribes. Are the tribes involved in discussions of, the path forward and everything that, we're hearing here?
Either one of us could probably talk to that. Okay. Yes. On a fairly routine basis, we have discussions with the governor, as well as we engage in outreach with the Pueblo members themselves. There's a structure that's different than, a United States, with House and Senate and then state governments. There's a separate structure there, and we try to perform outreach, including with members of the Pueblo, public members of the Pueblo.
Tribal council is kind of like the Congress. The tribal council is a group of the governors, so it's...
So that is part of our outreach, as well as obviously working closely with the regulator and with interested other members of the public, non-Pueblo, but other members of the public as well.
Yeah, thank you. So in those kind of exchanges, do the tribes ask for technical inputs, from PIs like Monty, or is that, at the high manager level, only about the general planning, not really getting into the nitty-gritty details?
I would say that generally speaking, whether it's the Pueblos or members of the public, there's much more basic information provided, much more basic questions coming from members of the public who don't live this every day, don't model it, aren't out there doing the sampling along with us, et cetera. And they need a much more basic understanding, and so that's more the nature of the interactions.
But some of these, some of these simulations that I just showed, we, especially when we are planning CREAM 5 and CREAM 4, these injection wells which are right next to San Ildefonso boundary, the representative of the tribal council, whatever it is, they participated and they watched the movies, and they, there was a lot of some level of technical discussion and interest about the model predictions as well.
Yeah, it depends on who you're referring to specifically, but we also have the need to be on Pueblo land to do some of our sampling, and so we obviously do that. The Department of Energy does that through government-to-government interactions that allow that to happen. And so in the process of that, the more technical folks also learn about the data. We also supply the data to a public website that which we're trying to improve the ability to serve that data in a manner that's useful to people. That's been a challenge as well, but we're making progress on that.